Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be discussing strategy development, which is the next stage in the 7-step sourcing process. Most of the stuff in this stage is dependent upon the research and the analysis that you did in the previous stages. So this stage is more about kind of putting those pieces together, coming up with a strategy and working on that strategy and moving it forward so that you can actually start realizing the value through total cost of ownership, through savings, and through other means of bringing value to your organization. So let's jump right in. All right, guys. So the second stage, which is called strategy development, overall jumping right in. This is the second stage, and as I mentioned earlier, the idea is to combine what you've done previously in the previous stage to bring that data together and put that together to build I would say, a outward and inward facing sort of strategy. So there are two key elements, and you can kind of break this down into three as well. But the first element is the market and risk intelligence. So what is market and risk intelligence? Market intelligence is basically all the factors that are influencing the market right now. An example would be travel. So if you're looking to negotiate good travel rates for airlines, if you had done that 2 years ago, that would be really easy because at that point there was limited travel, therefore the demand was low and you had the most of the leverage. But however, travel has picked up. It's one of the industries that are coming back up online after the pandemic, and now going and negotiating at this point of time might be difficult. So it's important to understand what are the factors that are influencing that. And the other factor that ties to the market is the risk analysis. The reason why I think risk is really important to consider is you're trying to understand what are the different factors or different ways that there could be a failure that could happen. And if you're anticipating those things, or if you're actually pre-planning for those, and kind of working with your suppliers who has actually worked on these things, it actually makes for a more forward-thinking strategy. The second piece of this is the sourcing strategy finalization. So what do you mean by sourcing strategy? So we talked about category strategy, we talked about market and risk intelligence, but how do you go to the market and what does that mean? So how do you go and engage your suppliers? What are the strategies? What sort of bids you're going to be conducting? How is that bid going to look? What's the structure of the bid? How many people you're inviting? How many rounds you're going to have in the bid? These are the different elements that build up to the sourcing strategy finalization piece. So jumping right into the market risk intelligence. So as I mentioned earlier, the review the market intelligence data and understand the data that outlines the certain categories. So for example, logistics could be impacted by fuel costs and so on. And once you understand the cost factors that are impacting the category, what you can actually do is try to plan for them. So is there a possibility to lock in for certain rates or have some sort of a range in the rate so that way you know what's going to be the maximum cost that you're going to incur and what's going to be the minimum cost. And then moving on from there is to understand how can that impact your day-to-day operations. So if you have a shortage of truck drivers, and your company depends upon daily deliveries of your supplies, then that's an issue. So you want to understand that you actually have an ability to build safety stock somewhere, or look at maybe you can have a second company that can actually come in and provide drivers. And the outcome of this sort of market and risk intelligence is to have a good understanding of the external factors that can impact your category that you're looking to source. So that is the key takeaway, is to understand what are the external things from a market and risk perspective that can impact your category. So moving on is the sourcing strategy finalization. So the first step of the sourcing strategy analysis or finalization is to do an analysis of the total cost of ownership. So what does that mean? That means to understand what are the total cost factors that are driving the category. So this is not just the cost of the product. This is a cost that's going to be the transportation cost, the cost for maintaining, the cost for running, the preventive maintenance, and so on. So what are the total different factors that are impacting this category? And that's really needed for building out your sourcing strategy. And then the key aspect is to understand what's the market size. So is this a niche product that you're looking to source, or is this something that's basically off the shelf? Which means if it's off the shelf, that means there are more suppliers out there that can provide the same exact product. So it's important to understand what is the market size or supplier size for supplier considerations. The next piece is the sourcing approach and the sourcing levers. So there's two different things to this. The sourcing approach has dependencies upon the market and so on, and the lever depends upon the size and all the different factors of the company. So I'll be going into that a little more in detail right now. So sourcing approach and levers. So the idea of the sourcing approach is if you kind of put a 2x2 block, you've got the buyer power on the bottom, and the y-axis is the current market conditions. So based on the buyer power, if it's low or high, these are the different factors that will influence your sort of strategies that you can take. And from your sourcing approach, so for example, if you have a low buyer power and unfavorable conditions, you actually would want to work with the existing supplier to maximize what you can get out of this. Attempt to fix the service level issues, attempt to fix other factors that are happening here. On the other hand, if you have high buyer power and high current market conditions, then you can actually leverage the organization's buying power. So you can say, okay, fine, let's look at everything that we're going to buy. Let's look at our volumes. Let's look at market conditions, look at market competition. Can we go to the competition and get a better deal? So that's how you want to actually understand the levers. So as you can see, you can kind of fall into different blocks. Feel free to take a look at this further, but the idea is try to pull and build your sourcing approach based on your buyer power as well as your current market conditions. So then the sourcing approach will then translate into your sourcing levers. So what does this mean? So for example, taking the same exact approach, buyer power, and you're looking at current favorable market conditions. If it's low, you're establishing a joint process to improve objectives. So you're trying to work with the suppliers to understand, hey, here's the key things that are causing problems for us. Can we just focus on addressing these? On the other hand, if you actually have strong market buyer conditions and strong current market conditions, you actually could go out to the market and conduct an RFP or RFX. An RFX is basically, the reason why you say RFX is that you could do an RFI, RFP, RFQ, depending upon your strategy. But the idea is you can go out to the market and engage the suppliers in the market to help drive that sort of process. So that is the approach translated into the lever. So first you need to understand the approach, what you want to take, and then using that approach, you want to translate that into your strategy that you're going to approach. So combining these two together is your sourcing strategy finalization and how it actually basically puts things together for you. So that was today's video, strategy development, which is the second stage of the 7-step sourcing process. There are two key objectives for this stage. The first objective is market and risk intelligence, which focuses on what are the external factors that will impact the category that you're looking to source. As long as you're doing your due diligence on that, you would be able to build a sound strategy into your RFP. The second aspect is the sourcing strategy finalization. The sourcing strategy finalization is dependent upon the sourcing approach and sourcing levers. The sourcing approach and levers are also I would say, condition on what are the market conditions, the buyer levers, or strengths or leverages, and how they can actually approach that. If you have low buyer power and unfavorable market conditions, you're going to work with the existing vendor to maximize the outcomes. On the other hand, if you have high buyer power and favorable market conditions, you could actually go out and do an RFP or RFX and test what the market has to offer. So this stage, in a sense, is an extension of the category assessment stage. The aspect or main focus here is looking at external factors as well as your sourcing strategy, which will determine how you're going to approach the next stages of this 7-step sourcing process. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to jumping on to the next video. So if you have any questions or comments, please post them down below in the section, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.